What's going on, family? This is Carrie of You're Not the Only One. First, I want to thank you guys for coming this far along with us and staying faithful with the page and continuing to comment, share, and like. Now, you know how the page started. We had a foundation where people were sharing their story on the board, strangers, friends that I knew, but we want to do it in a more intimate setting. So that's what we're doing right here, right now, changing some things up. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview. I have with me Vernique, Esther. I'm going to let her introduce herself. Let her tell you guys who she is and why she's here.
Hey guys, so I'm Vernique Esther. I am the creator of Authentically Wed, which is a platform and blog built off of encouraging women to be their healthiest and best selves in all of their relationships. So my whole thing is to make sure that everybody masters the art of what I call relationshiping. So giving tips and just encouraging women and men sometimes as well who follow my page. You know, they sneak follow, they think I don't know. But you know, everybody wants to know how to have relationships. Everybody wants to have relationships, but I want to make sure that we all have healthy relationships and sustaining relationships. So that's kind of who I am and what I do. And I'm really excited to be here today, Carrie. Thank you.
Well, I really want to thank you for being here because I have been following your story, and I knew Vernique since high school. We go back. So seeing how you've grown into this woman, getting married and things like that, it was just awesome to see. But something did occur to why you started this organization, and I do want you to tell the platform and myself, what how did it start? Where are you coming from with that? What happened? And where did that birth of Authentically Wed come from? So just tell us a little bit about your story, and I got a couple questions for you, and then we can go from there.
All right. So, it's kind of a long story, but I guess the highlights are that in my freshman year of college at Valdosta State, go Blazers.
Don't know nothing about that.
I met my college sweetheart, and we dated off and on throughout the time that I was in college, and then we eventually got engaged and married when I was 23. We were married for about a year. The first year was, a little bit rocky, but it's kind of common with everyone. But for the most part, I really enjoyed it. And a lot of my friends, because I was so young, they had not yet been married. So they always looked to me for tips and like, well, what's it like? And, what's the experience like? And so I started to just kind of record stuff here and there, like go live, and we did silly stuff. Or sometimes I was like, hey, we got into an argument today. Like, this is how that looks. And so eventually, I was also in graduate school for social work. I'm a social worker by trade, and I remember just feeling this sense of like I was kind of losing myself a little bit. I was full-time in school, but I was also a wife. When I wasn't one of those things, I was doing something at my church. I was very involved. And so I felt like, where is Vernique? Like, where am I? And so I remember one day I was praying, and God just gave me the word authentic. And I just kind of mulled over that a little bit. I'm like, well, what are you saying? Because I was just praying that God would just give me something for me in a way that I can get closer to him, but also like share my heart with other people. And so as I prayed some more, eventually like Authentically Wed came to mind. And then I had some friends, like I kind of threw this idea out there, like I want to blog about millennial marriage. Like I want to blog about young marriage and like the realities of it, because I feel like the Christian bloggers that are out right now, it's like very one-sided. They're either very like, oh my gosh, marriage is amazing, or they're like, you know what, don't even worry about it, like stay single till you die, like marriage is horrible. And so I just wanted to be the person that was like in the middle, that was like, you know what, marriage is really hard, but it was one of the best decisions I felt like I had ever made in my life. And so what's the reality of it? Because I think people jump into marriage and they're so excited about marriage without knowing what it actually means to have a sustaining and lasting relationship, and the joys and the trials that come with it. So I wanted to give an authentic view of what marriage really is.
That's beautiful.
And so I did that within my first year of marriage. And then actually a year and a half, just about going on 2, and like a few months later, as I was preparing to graduate grad school and all these things, my husband at the time got a call from his job that they were moving him to Tallahassee for 3 months. And so long story short, within the first 2 weeks of that 3-month assignment, he ended up having an affair. And it was totally devastating. I was told essentially that it was an emotional affair, which can be just as tragic. I don't care what anybody says. It can be just as traumatic and just as tragic as a physical affair or infidelity. And so I just kind of went into this tailspin. I was like in kind of my final weeks of coursework, but I literally like left And I told my teachers, like, hey, I'm having a family emergency. I have to go.
Right.
Whatever assignments you want me to do, I will complete them online. And so they were very gracious to me in that way. And so I finished everything up while I was I went back to Tallahassee with him to kind of figure out, like, how are we going to salvage this? It was kind of really 911, like, we just need help kind of a situation. And so I did that. I finished everything up by the grace of God. I went back, graduated, and then returned back to Tallahassee, where I was just kind of in, like, assessment, like, let me figure out, like, emergency FEMA mode, you know, where I was like, well, what's going on? So we got into counseling, we did those things, but throughout that time, there was still just some sort of disconnect. It seems like he wasn't really trying to work on the marriage. Though he would say one thing, he was still very unsure about what he even wanted. And then eventually the word came out that it actually was a physical affair. So I found out through somebody else, through text message actually, that more had occurred, and then he confessed further. And so from then on, things kind of went downhill from there, as I felt like, of course, like, okay, I can't trust you, you've been lying to me for 2 months, and so I don't, you know, I'm kind of at the end of my rope. And so was he, and he was actually at a point where he was like, well, I just don't even care anymore. You know. And it took a lot of, when you get married, like, especially for those of us who are Christians, you know, we believe that you become one, you know, you become one flesh. And so that process of, like, tearing away can be very painful, and it can be very hard to do because your mind, it's all, you have to make a decision first. It all starts in your mind, then everything else follows. And so it took a little bit of time, but eventually, after much prayer and just like, okay, God, I feel like I've done all that I can do. I really poured everything out that I had, every resource, because I truly believed as a wife that it was not God's will that I divorce. However, biblically, that is one of the things that, you know, is permissible, is that, like, if there's infidelity in your marriage or whatever, you're able to leave. And so I battled with that back and forth, and eventually I remember praying to God, and I was like, look, I see that this whole thing is ending, but I'll let go under one condition, and it's that you promise me that my latter will be greater than my former, meaning what's in front of me and what it is my future is going to look like is going to be better than my past, because this was my college sweetheart, and so I really, like, I couldn't imagine a world or a life where I wasn't with him. Everybody always identified us together. We did ministry together. We traveled together. And so since I was 18, this was like the guy that everybody was like, yeah, like, it makes sense. And so now that this was not going to be, I needed God to shape my thinking, to show me that my life could be different and it could be better. Those were that was my only requirement, that God, that you show me that my life can be better. And when he gave me that peace, I mean, it was like instantaneous. I was able to let go. We left to different places. In September of 2018, he ended up moving to Miami, and then, you know, the divorce followed through from there. And so, and I can honestly say, by God's grace, like, I'm living my best life. Like, he truly kept his promise to me. I am a totally better and more evolved version of myself than I ever could have been had I stayed with him. Because though I was doing Authentically Wed, God then gave me vision to rebrand it and make it about healthy relationships. And I remember feeling so much shame. Like, how can I talk about healthy relationships when I had a failed marriage? But God was like, don't worry about that. Like, I legitimize you. You don't legitimize yourself. And on top of that, my story actually brings more authenticity to what it is that I say. Like, I can tell you what it is to have healthy relationships, and how to, what are the markers of toxic relationships and things like that, because I've lived through it. And I understand now, you know, hey, if I call myself, like, I'm like the little big cousin, you know. I go through all the bad stuff for you, so that way, so you know, I can tell you, like, hey, so don't go there, don't do that, you know.
That's beautiful, creating that roadmap.
Exactly, but I also think that I even after that, and even going forward, I'm going to also have a story of triumph to tell, like I already do. But even more so, and I totally believe that one day I'm going to get remarried to an awesome guy, and you know, I'm going to just keep doing the work that I'm doing. But I really just, this is weird to say, I guess, but I'm just really proud of the person that I am today, even triumphing over that, and then the things that I've done. So I rebranded in January, and then I launched the LLC, Vernique, Esther & Co. LLC, which houses Authentically Wed, as well as other things that I plan on venturing out and doing. And like I said, I rebranded, and it's blown up. Honestly, like, I was super stagnant before, and as soon as I rebranded, everything changed. So in a matter of you know, 5 months, I've garnered not just more following, but more people who have just attached themselves to my story, who have shared and who message me and are like, oh my gosh, like this is exactly what I've been through. Tell me how you made it, or like I want to know more about how to endure and be on the other side. Or even some people who stayed in their relationships that dealt with infidelity, and they're like, you know, I chose to stay, but I still have all these questions. And so I'm able to be in that position. I'm really grateful for it. And so I have some more projects and stuff coming, but that's pretty much the gist of my story.
I love it. You guys, this is what this is all about. You're not the only one as a platform where I want people to be able to come and connect by just knowing people's story, with what she's going through. I know a lot of my audience have probably gone through that, or you may know someone who's currently going through that and can come and watch this segment really quick and really get some type of good feedback from it. But I don't know if anyone else has this question, but I did have this one question. When you did find out through text message that first time that it was an emotional thing that he had going on in Florida, was it through text message? Was it from him? Was it?
So how did I find out?
Yeah, first time. And when you found out, what went through your head immediately? What did you think about?
Yeah, that's such a really good question. So I, you know, as I've kind of stated already, I'm Christian, and so one day I just felt like something wasn't right. Like he wasn't answering my calls as quick. Like he was kind of dodging me. And so I was like, something feels right. But I didn't really ever consider like it could be an affair. I don't know why, but I was just like, I don't know, you know, what's going on. And I had a couple of my girlfriends who were rotating, like staying at my house because they knew I wasn't used to kind of being on my own, especially for that length of time. And one of them was just like, something just doesn't, like, I'm in your house and something just doesn't feel right. And I was like, okay. And so long story short, the Holy Spirit literally told me to go through his emails. Like something that I'd never done before. I don't go through phones, I don't do all of that. Like I assume that we're all adults and we're gonna do the right thing. Also, there wasn't much secrecy, so I could pick up his phone and not worry about it. But with him not being in town, I didn't have access to his phone, so I went and I logged into his email, and all the evidence was there actually, and it was under an alias, and I ended up knowing who the person was. I actually had a relationship with their family, all that kind of stuff. So that's how I found out, and then he confessed at that point. And then the second time, there was a text message where the person thought that they might have been pregnant, and so they weren't, but that's how the other part came up, because then he had to confess about the fact that it was actually more than emotional. So yeah, that's pretty much how I found out. And so that, and just like for any ladies out there watching, discernment, and I guess some people call it women's intuition, is a real thing. I'm talking about on point. There was not a single thing that I missed. Like there wasn't anything that, like, when I saw something, I was like, this is what's happening here, and that's what would come to light. And I really
just what you were feeling inside.
And I really, you know, I indicate that as like the Holy Spirit, but honestly, like there is something. It's like if you trust your instincts, that's all I can really say, because all the evidence, I had zero evidence other than like something just feels off, and then I knew exactly where to go to find what it was that I needed. And so
so immediately you found this out, you go through the emails and you see all of this. The few weeks following after that, where were you at mentally, emotionally? What were you like, okay, whatever, I'm cutting it off, I'm over that? Or were you in a state where it was crazy?
So I remember calling my pastor, like, I don't know what to do.
The day of?
The day of, the same night, because I was kind of, again, this was, not only was this my husband, it was literally my best friend. So I know a lot of people say that, but that was my homie. And so in my mind, I was like, I felt betrayed on two levels. But also what my immediate thought was like, you need help. Like, this is a cry for help. And so I went into like salvaging mode. Like, okay, what did you do? Like, what exactly did you do, and why did you do it? How can we get you help? Because he was also battling some depression as well. And so, like, how can we get you help? Who is it that we can call? And so I remember pulling on a lot of resources, like my pastor, some of his close friends, and calling them in to kind of like, hey, your brother needs help. I'm hurting, but he needs help. And so I remember that was kind of my first instinct, was to call on people that I felt like could help. The other thing was, of course, shock, and just like I remember feeling like the world was spinning, like I don't know, like in reverse. And so
like
just like this, it doesn't feel exactly. It didn't feel real. I felt like I was kind of in a daze, and that was really my next few weeks. I kind of just did what I knew to do, which was get my work done, because I still had to finish school. And then I spent a lot of time praying, a lot of time crying. But I reached out. I will say I used trusted people that I could just pour out to, that I knew wasn't going to judge me or judge my situation, that were just genuinely there for me. And so that was really important. I pulled in on a lot of help, whether it was for him or for me. But my general mind state was just I was kind of in a daze, just trying to, again, that like 911 like survival mode, like that, like the basis of survival mode that you kind of go into when anything traumatic happens.
So another important question I wanted to ask, because I know you touched on him going through depression. Did you know, was he going through depression before you guys got married, or was it after the marriage? Why do you think things played out the way it played out? Because he went to Florida and it was after 2 weeks.
Like actually the day he left, it was like that.
It was like that.
So the person was kind of waiting. They knew that he was leaving.
So they were already having conversations before they even went over there.
I don't know.
Thinking about it now, it's like
no, and I don't think about it because at this point it's no longer my problem. But there's speculation, but that what I know is enough. And so supposedly the day that he left was when everything occurred. But remind me of your question again.
Why do you think things?
Okay. Did he have depression before and things like that? So one, I would say there were probably markers of some sort of mental health battles. Not necessarily. I don't think that he was diagnosable. Even when we had him assessed because there was some suicidality. There were signs of depression at that point. But prior to, I think that he did probably struggle with some levels of depression and just general like dissatisfaction with maybe himself or life. But it's so hard to dig into those types of things because we all just deal with stuff differently. And so what would have caused me in a state of depression and him in a state of depression, we would go down different paths. And so it's hard to really pinpoint. There were a lot of things, and the main thing, honestly, above any sort of depression was actually just an identity crisis. I don't think that he truly knew who he was. And so when you don't know who you are and when you're not content with yourself, and I remember we were talking about this earlier, as far as wholeness and being whole and within yourself, and that doesn't mean perfection, but it means like a knowing and a self-awareness of you and who you are, and just a contentment and a confidence in that. And I don't know that he always had that. He always felt like maybe other people tried to define him, and none of those boxes ever fit. And so when you don't know who you are, you tend to act outside of yourself. And so I think that when, even to this day, I don't believe that this, like what he did, is indicative of who God created him to be and who he is as a person, though it was wrong and there's consequences that go with that. But I don't think that necessarily is a statement of who he is. And the reason why I say that is because when you don't, like I said, when you don't know who you are, you will act outside of yourself and you will act outside of who you should be. And so though he is 100% responsible for his actions, when identity crises are real. And that's why, like, people in our age, like, your mid-20s, early to mid-20s, we're all kind of trying to figure it out. Right. You're really trying to figure things out. And so it's okay to figure things out, and you're going to still keep figuring things out. But I think to have just an assuredness and a foundation of who you are and what it is that you stand for, what it is that you value within yourself. And it's also important, not just for him, but for me, because had I not, had a semblance and had a searching of who I was, and I wasn't confident in who I was, not to say that I'm, I don't ever struggle with any sort of internal issues, I do, but like I still have this sense of like stillness within myself. And so had I not, that would have defined me. And I wouldn't be able to bounce back from it, because that would have, like, him cheating would have said something about me. But I had to choose to in my mind, like, this is not a personal thing. This is not him making a statement about me, nor will I pick that up as a statement about me. I knew who I was as a wife. I knew who I was as a partner and as a friend. And not to say that I was perfect, but that is not indicative of me. It doesn't define or describe me. And it's not a call on how I operated within the relationship. And so wholeness is important on both levels. And when you're going through an identity crisis, which I really think is kind of the sum of where he was, you're liable to do anything. And so that's why wholeness is important, before you get into a relationship. Just a settling and a knowing and an awareness of who you are.
And I know you were talking about it while you were telling your story, but I want you to really capitalize or emphasize on that. Where was God during and after him cheating and things like that?
I mean, he was there the whole time. I never felt truly forsaken. Now there were times where I was just like, God, I don't understand. Like, what is happening? Why would you allow this to happen? Like, you know, I had a kind of a rough childhood growing up, and so I really felt like getting married was like we made it, guys. You know what I mean? Like, we did it. Yeah, like, woo, good. Like, mom ain't got to worry no more. Like, we're all good. And it's so funny even to say that, because now I understand that God is my foundation. Like, God is my provider and provision. He is my, he's my safe place, not my marriage, you know, and not this person, because people will fail you, but God won't. And so to go back to your question, he was everywhere. Like, he was the one who allowed me to see what was going on, and he was the one who kind of kept me. And in those moments where I literally felt insane, and I'm talking about, like, I would wake up in the morning and go straight to my prayer closet and just like sit, and whether it was just to cry, whether it was to read a devotional, whether it was to read my Bible, whatever it was, have moments with God and just be rebuilt and strengthened for that day, because I didn't know what hurdle was going to be in front of me. And so having, like, I really believe I had a personal relationship with God, to where, like, I can hear him, and where I recognize when he's strengthening me, or those moments that I have with him allow me to feel like replenished, and still to even, like, there were moments where I was still able to even laugh. You know, in moments like that, or where I was able to still enjoy certain things. Because I was in Tallahassee, we were living in this apartment complex, and I had this gorgeous pool, and I would just spend time out there sometimes and just read, you know, things that I didn't have time to do. I would exercise in the morning. I actually took extra steps to do my best to take care of myself. But God was there the whole time, giving me strategy, like pouring into me and reminding me that this is not a definition of me, like reminding me of who I am, you know, and reminding me, like, giving me wisdom on, like, hey, do this. Or maybe, like, even though it's hard, because you have to humble yourself sometimes, even though I felt like, oh, I'm right, I have the right to be, you know, I could have cussed him up and down the street, but God was literally like, no, like, first of all, you have done things too. You sinned against me too. And though it may not have been in this way, you're not perfect. So when you approach somebody else, when you approach a creation of God, a child of God, you have to still have a sense of humility, even when you're right. You know, and it's really hard. But those are the things that I learned. Like, I learned a lot of lessons, and I feel like God matured me in that situation to respond appropriately. And did I always? No. There were times where I went off. But there were also times where, there were times where, like, I heard the words of God clearly, and I chose moments where I could actually speak into his life instead of trying to tear him down at that moment. And that was my whole thing, was God, like, however it is, I don't know why I'm going through this situation, and I feel like lost, and I wonder, am I just made for this life of suffering? But if there's any way that I can partner with you, like, I would rather, instead of just kicking against the situation, instead of just, like, how I wanted to sometimes, was just lay down and die, you know, but instead of that, like, God, how can I partner with you in the redemption of this man's life, and even in the restoration of my own?
That is good. That is so good. Not a lot of women are able to think that way, or even come to that place of thinking, because it's just that emotional rush, that betrayal, and all that nasty stuff that comes with.
But that's what being in relationship with God does, though, is you have to have a different perspective. You know, the Bible talks about, like, renewing your mind and putting on the mind of Christ. I could not act like me in that situation, because me was not strong enough to withstand. I would have broke. You know, or been in jail somewhere. Listen, but
like a lot of us would have.
Hello, throw some bows, But I, as Vernique, would not have been strong enough. I needed God in order to respond the way that I did, and to be who I was, and to come out of the fire better and not burned. So that's why it's not me. It's not because there's something extraordinary about me. It was the decision for me to lay myself down. And again, your role as a wife doesn't stop just because somebody cheated. You know, or your role as a husband doesn't stop because your wife cheated. You're still that. And so, okay, God, how do I still be a wife when I feel hurt and betrayed? And only the grace of God can empower and can cause you to do that. But that is literally the life of a believer, is that you no longer react the way Vernique wants to react. I now need to see, okay, God, how do you perceive this situation? Let's sit at the boardroom and strategize and figure out how I'm going to get out of this mess.
So what about the people who are not as strong with God the way you were and are right now? Like, they go to church, but they don't really know God like that. They don't really talk to him on a regular basis. If they're going through that same situation right now, what would you tell them to do? Like, how do they turn that light switch off with God to really be able to overcome that and not react off their own feelings and emotions, but off of what God wants them to do?
Right. So I kind of feel like, you know, it's two questions. So one, how do you kind of strengthen your relationship with God? And so the biggest way is community, right? Like you latch on to people and you connect with people who are where you want to be. And so whether that is somebody that you know who goes to church, or somebody at the church that you may go to, whether that is even sometimes people online, I don't know, like, because people meet people different ways, but like find somebody who you feel like may have a strong relationship with God, and you just ask them. It starts with personal relationships. The other thing is reading your Bible and just trying to pray. It may be easier. It's just a conversation. And so taking that time out to just be like, okay, God, like, I don't, be honest. Like, I don't even know if you're real, but I have all these questions and I have all these issues and I have all these concerns. And I'm just gonna throw them out there and just start that conversation, open that dialogue. One thing that I've always heard when I was younger was like, God is a gentleman, so he's not gonna force anything on you. So if you open up and you're like, okay, God, like, I want to know what it's like to hear your voice, and just give him a chance to talk back to you or to show you that he's near. The other thing is that there are practical steps to this too. Like, it seems really mystical. I did pray and I did do all these different things, but I also sought counseling. I had a dedicated counselor for me in marriage counseling, and he even had his own counselor that he consorted with. And then I also, again, community. I had trusted, very, very trusted people. Not everybody got the details of my story, but I had very trusted people that I leaned on and that I was able to call and text at any point in the day, and I knew that they would be there for me and would be able to hear me out. And not just like, I could vent and cry and whatever I wanted to do, and they do that with me, but they would also give me wisdom and accountability for the way that I was even stewarding that season, is to make sure that I was even taking care of myself. Are you eating? Are you drinking water? Are you exercising? Those types of things. And I didn't always do the best at that. Like, I ended up losing weight through that, which I'm not entirely mad at. But
a couple shit
I know I could think of go. But essentially, like, people who were surrounding me. And then, of course, like I said, prayer and things like that. Like, I just clung to my time with God in the morning, taking those things. So there are pivotal steps, and I read a lot of articles and I read a lot of books and I asked a lot of questions and I had a lot of honest conversations. But I couldn't have done it without those things: counseling, community, and just taking time for me and making sure that I was taking care of myself. So even if you're not a Christian, like, there are still ways to overcome that. But I definitely, like, God is my source for everything. And I don't know that I could have gone through that situation without having someone higher than myself.
How do you think it would? What would Vernique be, or who would you be right now if it wasn't for God? Like,
I would be a hot mess. Like, I'd probably be depressed and super anxious and just, all sorts. And I don't know that I would have made it. I mean, there were even times in my life previous to, and even a moment when I was going through what I was going through, where I even thought about suicide. And so, had I not felt like, there's a promise for me and there's a hope in the future, I think that I wouldn't be here today.
Wow. So we really enjoyed you. I enjoyed your story. You've been great. I got one more question for you, and then we're going to wrap it up. What are your concerns? And what are you looking forward to in the future after everything happening? You got your organization going on. Tell me more about that.
So concerns, man, I think, we all think about the future. And I know for me, like, because I do want a family and I do, one day hope to be remarried, I'm like, okay, like, am I going to experience the same thing again? Like, okay, it's great to have that comeback story, but let's not repeat it. I think one time around was enough. And so sometimes I think about that, like, okay, God, like, how are we going to do this again one day? Trusting somebody again. And then with as far as my business and stuff, just hoping that, my story gets into, to those who need it and to those who really, need to hear stories of triumph and overcoming, not just because, like, to say, like, oh my gosh, like, your life gets amazing after divorce, because that's not the point. The point is that, like, it doesn't matter what you go through in life, like, there is a way to overcome it. And so, my heart is just that people hear and that they experience and that they get in touch with my platform, if they need hope, if they need to know how to have healthy relationships and how to bounce back and those types of things, because there is, like, there's a sense of resilience within me, but there's also there are practical steps to that as well. Like I talked about, like, connecting with people and getting counseling and those types of things. But I'm really looking forward to those same things. Like having a family in the future again, or in the future. as well as like seeing the blossoming of my business. As you know, I just had my first event, which was
beautiful, you guys.
Thank you. Yes. I was glad you came. Pillow Talk, and it was talking about how should infidelity be an expectation, especially in relationships today, because infidelity is everywhere. You know, everybody's talking about it. Everybody experiences it after, like when it's all on the tabloids and whatnot. But nobody talks about how do you get there, how do you prevent it, how do you how do you deal when it happens. So those types of things, having those real conversations, and I hope to continue to do that and to continue to use my platform. And so I'm excited about the future events and the future things that I'll do with Authentically Wed. And I'm just excited. Like, I just bought a house, so that's a really cool thing.
Let's applaud that.
Thank you. It's really awesome. So I'm just excited about just all the possibilities before me. I think that, like, truly, like, beyond the sky is the limit. And I'm just excited to see what God does next. You know, it's always an adventure. So I'm looking forward. I have some concerns, but I'm ultimately looking forward to all of those same things.
Well, I wish you the best. Your story is amazing. I do know people do go through, even if it's not infidelity, whatever the situation may be, just to be able to go through that and understand why it's happening, where you were at, to use God as your foundation, to overcome that, and just to have a comeback that's serious like this. You buying your first house, and starting your organization up like that, launching your first event. It's beautiful, because not a lot of people are able to be in that state. And I love the fact that we were able to sit down together and go into details. And I really want my followers to really see just the details and stuff like that, and just in this intimate setting, so people who are currently going through situations like that could see maybe pick some things that they can use for their own stuff to be able to survive through their situation, regardless of what that situation is. And I just love the whole God idea thing. So you guys, thank you guys for watching. Again, this is Vernique Esther. I will have all her information down in the description below, but tell them where they can find you. Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at Authentically Wed, AUTHENTICALLY WED. So at Authentically Wed. You can also go to my website, which is www.authenticallywed.com. Beautiful. And then you can find me on Facebook. My Facebook page is Vernique Esther. Yes. So yeah, those are the ways you can keep in touch with me. Okay. Guys, make sure to share, like, comment your thoughts about the whole video. Make sure you show your family, show your friends, let people know about this video. There's more to come. Thank you guys for watching. This is You, Not the Only One.